Okay, we're going to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really cool review for you from the brand Prometheus. A little about them. They were founded back in 2008, and they're a micro brand with a vintage, normally 60s and 70s aesthetic that focuses on evolving design classics of the past while taking advantage of today's modern manufacturing improvements. They're a sister brand to the popular Borealis watch company, and a lot of times they're focusing on, I'd say a little bit more on the contemporary side when it comes to them changing things up. Now, I think this is a great example of that, right? This is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design. When you're looking for a diver, water resistance, typically some type of screw down crown, or something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. You're going to see this is a much different layout than that. For one, there's no dive time bezel. So yeah, this is their Jamanta in the pastel blue, and this is no date, and this is a prototype preview, really. They describe this as a mesmerizing fusion of style and performance. The Jamanta Diver is an impeccably crafted tool designed for the audacious explorers of aquatic realms. You can get this for $415 with a full deposit in terms of pre-order, or $250 partial deposit, and you can get that, of course, direct from the brand. And this is a really interesting piece. It is on the larger side. It's 42 millimeters, and again, it doesn't have a diving, there's a diver's rotating bezel. So this is going to wear very different. But I don't know. There's something about it really caught my eye. So when they reached out, I was kind of happy to check it out, just because I'm personally curious in terms of what this watch model is all about. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys. So as you can see, I mean, just at face value, very handsome, very well spaced out and designed. It's just a little bit large, and I think that's kind of making a comeback in terms of larger, bulkier watches. As much as, of course, the small vintageized trends keep coming, I think there's still a lot of people who enjoy large watches, and it's a big part of the market. So it's cool to see independent brands focus on some, a bit more of a broader spectrum versus just kind of focusing always on people who want these smaller and smaller kind of, turn of the century inspired divers. So with that said, here you're getting a 42 millimeter diameter, 12.3 millimeters thick, and with that height, it actually doesn't seem like it is that thick because it's a little bit bigger, right? If this was a 39 millimeter watch, it would probably seem like the 12.3 was being worn a bit differently, right? Especially when you look at the size of these sides, that they're not a plain slab, but it is pretty slab sided. I do like these contouring details that they put in, and I really like these crown guards that almost look like they're screwed in. They may very well be, so that, I don't know, that's just like a really nice way to break up the lines in that silhouette there to make this not seem very thick. And honestly, 12.3 millimeters isn't that thick for a diver. I mean, people were going crazy for the Slim Turtle. It was 12.5 millimeters, right? So yeah, again, this is still relatively slim, and since it's wider, it just feels low slung, which I really like. 50.2 millimeters lug to lug, so it is on the larger side lug to lug, but I wouldn't say overly long. If it was like a 52, 53, I think 50 is the limit for a lot of folks, and I can see why. I mean, this is not a small watch. This is all 316L stainless steel, brushed and polished, mostly brushed with some really cool high polished accents there, and you can see the transitions are really nice and crisp. I mean, nothing I would say that's like luxury level, but in terms of a thoughtful premium sporty watch, I mean, that's, sorry, I just gave it a quick little wipe there. I think this is quite impressive. Check that out. Let's just go ahead and breathe a little bit of that in there. That is good looking, guys. That is very sharp, and not sharp to the touch, but sharp in terms of its execution. Very nice, tight tolerance there. So very cool. Now, in terms of some more of these details, the sapphire is flat. which I think was the right choice, especially for this, again, this kind of low slung, wider body. But it does have inner AR coating. The bezel is not a rotating bezel, it's fixed, but it has some pretty cool little notches there, about 12 of them, which I think is pretty cool. And in terms of legibility, especially since the way that it's finished even contrasts depending on the lighting, you can see that those notches kind of always hold the light a bit differently versus the satinization there on the brushing, where it's going to be playing with the light. That matted surface inside just kind of holds and reflects the light back, which I think is really cool to see that level of contrast and a little design feature like that. The crown is screw down and nicely signed with that Prometheus logo. I'm sure that is the flame of Prometheus for those of you that like to get into the history. And then of course we get down to the case back. Although you can't see the automatic Miyota 9039 in here, you can see this really cool little nice little case back design there with what looks like some type of stingray or manta ray. Very cool. And you can see there's a little bit of information on there. Prometheus, Jamanta, maybe that's what it is, Jamanta ray. And then you can see also that it is 300 meters of water resistance. And then this is pretty cool. I do like that. So it's nothing that'll dig into your wrist or leave a mark on it, but it is nice to look at. So, also this side, hey, you probably noticed a helium escape valve. Yes, so in terms of saturation diving, this is actually, it's set up for that. So, pretty cool, and it's nicely integrated. It's not one you have to turn or anything, so you can't mess that up, and you'll be good to go. And a lot of people kind of forget with, the arms race that is the dive watch world, where, they're creating multiples of thousands of meters of water resistance, that, as a human recreational diver, 40 feet is pretty normal. 40 meters is pretty much the max you're probably going to be diving. So, 300 meters is professional grade saturation diving. So really anything kind of beyond that, you just start getting into, just kind of hyper territory, right? Just hyper resistant, but not necessarily to a level that is useful for most folks. I think, dialing in a nice solid 300 meter diver and keeping things manageable in terms of the proportions, I think is a pretty smart move on their part. So I like when I do see that. Now, getting into the dial, you're getting this great pastel blue plank dial in terms of the, little bit of, those horizontal details there that are kind of imprinted. And then you do get some nice brushed gunmetal hands. So you're going to have a nice bit of contrast there regardless of the lighting situation. Of course, with the studio lights it can get a little bit harsh, but you guys can see there that the hands are just gleaming quite nicely, and when they're not, it's a nice kind of darker set backdrop against the bright blue. You also do get Swiss-made Superluminova BGW9, so this is going to glow blue very nicely. 30 atmospheres or 300 meters of water resistance, as we spoke about before. 22 millimeter lug width, so I think that's proportional. If this had a 20 millimeter lug width, it would probably make the watch head look way oversized. But you can see here it's going to flow nicely. I would have preferred a little bit more of a taper. It does have a taper. Some of you might see this and go, oh, it's not a non-tapering bracelet. No, it does taper. It's just not very much of a taper. It goes from 22 to 20, right? So not much of a taper, but it's there. So, you also get this nice this nice ratcheting solid clasp there with 3 positions of micro adjust. So, I'm sorry, this is a ratcheting clasp. So those aren't your micro adjust positions. You have 3 positions here, and then this is the diver's extension. Just got turned around on my notes there for a second, but this is a pretty popular ratcheting style setup. But again, if you did have this on your wrist and it was a really hot day, you could release it maybe a click or two and it wouldn't be too odd. Of course, it is unsightly if you were to try to really extend this thing to try to get a good fit. I think that looks really odd and it just makes the clasp overly long. So again, just go ahead and stick to this as a ratcheting diver's extension to go over a wetsuit, and then just use these pieces here to get the size dialed. And you can see, although this is a very stout watch, the actual links are quite short. So you don't even necessarily need a half link. You're gonna be able to dial in the size with just removing a link or adding a link, and then placing this here in terms of the 3 positions. So I think you'd be good to go. So with that said, one thing also to note, screw in links. Everybody loves the good screw-in links, and they're there. You can see fully satinized in terms of the bracelet. The sides, this H-link style, I think flows really well. It has a bit of the organic kind of round nature, but a little bit of also the hard straight lines, and so aesthetically, it does do a really great job of, creating its own style. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears really clean, guys. Of course, I do have a larger wrist at 7.5 inches, but it is relatively round. It's not like this flat, wide wrist that accommodates all large watches. So of course, if I do get my wrist too close to the camera there's going to be some perspective distortion, making that seem a little oversized. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low and then just kind of tighten up the frame here so you guys can still get a bit of a detailed look while still retaining a bit more of a I'd say true to form aspect ratio. But I think this thing looks good. Check that out. I mean, it's wide. It's kind of reminds me of, I don't know, when I see watches like this, I think of like a supercar, like a Lamborghini, right? They're just wide and low slung, and they have these cool creases and also organic lines all kind of mixed together. And I think this does a similar job. And you can see, I think the taper looks a little bit more pronounced when you have it on wrist, as you can see here. I think they could have maybe made it a little bit more tapered, but at the same time, I think the aesthetic here benefits from the wide links because this is a wide, slow slung, kind of sporty watch, right? And as long as you dig the way it looks, I think you'll definitely enjoy the way that it wraps around the wrist. And I mean, this is just a prototype, so I'm sure they'll refine everything. But I mean, in terms of the finishing, the edges, the the overall tolerances, I mean, this all looks really, really good. So with that said, let's get this off the wrist, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, that is beautiful, bright loom, as you would expect from a dive watch. So kudos to Prometheus for coming through there. But one thing, of course, I always like to work in is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include some harsh lighting, which might expose any types of production defects. But all you're going to see here is a bit of wear and tear from a prototype that has, been on a tour. And, but yeah, otherwise you can see very uniform in terms of the way the light glides off of that brushing, which means it is really well done. Again, not quite to some type of, premium luxury level, but for a tool watch, very clean and really nicely done. You're gonna be able to appreciate this when you have it on wrist for sure. And you can see really how legible this bad boy is. Check that out. I mean, even in kind of mixed lighting, when you're getting a little bit of blue on the dial, it's still really easy to tell what time it is. I like that they have the numeral 12 at the 12 o'clock. So cardinal position, you know that you, even in absolute darkness, you know that where 12 o'clock is, which means you know where every other adjacent marker is as well. It would have been nice if they did have some level of loom. Oh, actually, there is loom on the seconds hand. It's just reverse, right? Kind of like a Seiko SKX. So you can see the running second on the opposite side of the hand versus on the tip, which is cool because you're not necessarily going to be timing things down to the second when you're underwater. So I think that's actually kind of fun. And then you can see that the watch is still running because you do have right there on the counterbalance, it is loomed quite nicely. So check that out. And look, I mean, even when we get back to darkness, this is still looking really bright. So really well applied. And that's something that normally can kind of be hit or miss when it comes to prototypes. So the fact that this pre-production prototype already has really good loom just tells me that the, typically it gets even better when it comes to production. So getting into closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, hefty, but still, that low slung for a nice kind of wrist wrap, right? So it does wrap around your wrist really well. Sure, it might feel like you got a transformer on there, but the fact is it is pretty ergonomically smart in terms of its execution. In terms of model variants, there's a white or black dial option as well, which essentially will have either a blue or yellow accent. Blue on the white dial and then yellow on the black dial. And you can also have your choice of no date, as you can see here, or to have a date at the 6 o'clock. So I think that's a good amount of configuration there without getting too crazy. And then in terms of comparable models, while the rest of the kind of under $500 micro brand diver space feels pretty oversaturated with vintage homages, I think it's kind of cool to see a thoroughly modern, if not, maybe retro in some of its design cues, but still quite contemporary. And still kind of original feeling option in the works. Like I love that Prometheus is making watches right now and they're coming out with stuff that's different because there's so many brands that are just doing the same thing. So for me, guys, the final word here, bottom line, while this one obviously isn't for everyone, I think the Jamanta diver will really delight those that are looking for something more offbeat without sacrificing on the build quality. Sometimes you can find these really fun offbeat divers and they end up not really being serious tool watches. I think the cool thing here is this is a bit of an offbeat style, but the build quality feels definitely quite robust and what you would expect within this space, especially, even the full price of $415, that's pretty wild. So you're getting a really solidly built piece here. If you have the wrist to pull it off, or if you just like your watches generally a little bit bigger, I think you'll really enjoy this one. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.